Hey, what's up, everyone? This is the last request or invitation to the Cinco de Mayo event happening this weekend here at my pad. Um, I am outside right now, enjoying the breeze and the view of the city. When you guys come over, you will enjoy the same view and breeze. It's always really nice out here. We're going to have a borreguito on the pit, some other type of food, and we're going to have a big stadium here that I've been building that's meant to be fun for all the kids to play. I would suggest if you are going to make it out, maybe bring your some shorts or something just in case we get a little football game, either American football or football game going, if that's your thing. And we're going to have my 1 year anniversary podcast with special guest Buck Johnson from the Counterflow podcast, Matt Erickson from the King Pill podcast, Kyle Anslone from the Conflicts of Interest podcast, and Andrew from the Popular Liberty podcast. We're gonna have it inside of my house by the pool table. Gonna have several camera angles. It's gonna be highly produced by a movie producer here locally, and it should be a lot of fun. Then after that, we're going to have the Canelo fight. We're just gonna hang out, chill, drink. It's meant to be a good event, positive event, pro liberty, pro family. So if that's your thing, be sure to email me at loslibertinos210@gmail.com so I can give you information on the pitch in and all the details and times of the event. And for anybody that already has pitched in and are on the guest list, I cannot wait to meet some of you folks. This episode especially is with David Hathaway. Him and his wife and one of his kids are going to come over to the event. So if you liked what's is going to happen in this interview and you think it's kind of he's a cool vato to maybe interact with and ask some questions, well, he'll be here this weekend since he's a fan of the show. So family, friends are going to be here. It's going to be a good event. So this is me inviting you guys, and I really hope you can come out to, let's see if you can see that. Puro party, puro pinche Abelar. Okay, so that's me inviting you guys over to our home, and I really hope that you guys can make it out. Peace. Welcome, everyone, to Los Libertinos podcast. I am your host, Carlos Abelar, and this is Chingazos and Fire, episode number 42. Our guest today is David Hathaway. He is a retired DEA agent that is the current sheriff of Santa Cruz County, Arizona. He is the author of a book called Immigration, Individuals versus National Borders. He's based out of the border city of Nogales, Arizona. He's a family man and the first person I'm going to interview that has his own corrido. Plus, he's going to be hanging out with us at the Cinco de Mayo event here May 7th at my house. So if you find any of the interview intriguing, be sure to come visit us in person because I'm sure the conversations will get a lot deeper and more interesting in person. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Un gusto conocerle en persona, o por lo menos por la pantalla. Thank you for inviting me.
Perfect. Yeah, and I can't wait to meet you in person. So for anyone that listens to the podcast, maybe some of my primos cousins, my mom has actually said that she has heard of you before. And so for some of them actually might know who you are, maybe might have heard of you, but other people might have not. So can you kind of give us a background for like born, raised, and feel free to go back, generational there a little bit. I know you have some roots that go deep, so feel free to take all the time you want to kind of give a background and to your story and all that.
Muchas gracias, Carlos. Si no es problemático, si podemos hacer una mezcla entre español y inglés, like I was just telling Carlos, if it's not problematic, posible que sería más interesante para el auditorio del podcast si hacemos un poco una charla en español también. My history is, my family came to this area, Southern Arizona, before Arizona was a state. In the 1800s, Arizona became a state in 1912. My family is a ranching family and a mining family. I still have ranch property in two counties, Santa Cruz County and Cochise County, here in Arizona. So that's the history of my family. Myself, I was born in Nogales, Arizona, which is in about 100 meters, 100 yards from the US border. Where I was born was a little hospital called Hospital San Jose. It doesn't exist anymore. It's now a Burger King in the same building, but that's my history. Grew up in this border town that's 98% Hispanic. Met my wife here. We both went to public school together. When I graduated from school here, I went to the University of Arizona, which is up in Tucson. I became a deputy sheriff in the early 1980s in this same sheriff's office, and then I was recruited by the feds. I worked for DEA. I lived 8 years in South America. 5 años en Bolivia, 3 años en Paraguay. Durante President Reagan's war on drugs, when I was down there. My last position was the head of that agency here in Southern Arizona, in Nogales, Arizona. So, there's so many things we could go into, but, I've learned all the lessons of the failure of the drug war. We should have learned that during Prohibition, during alcohol prohibition that went 1920 to 1933, that it doesn't work to try to prohibit a substance. So I witnessed all of that firsthand. I guess that's about it from my background. I had a very problematic campaign because all the mask mandates and social distancing mandates came up during my campaign. I've only been the sheriff for a little over a year. My idea for being sheriff was to just give people their freedom to not run anybody's life, to oppose all the mask mandates, social media mandates, all the vaccine mandates that were going to be coming along. So, that'd probably be a good time to give it back to you. Is like in my campaign, I had a big fight with local media. They tried to crucify me because I opposed all the mandates. My friends told me, hey, you shot yourself in the foot. You cost yourself the election because you opposed all the mask mandates and all that. They told me you should have just gone with the flow. And then, you probably lost yourself the election. But I told them, look, if the people are that dumb, if the voters are that dumb, all I want to do is stand up for their freedoms. If they're that dumb that I lose, then I deserve to lose. But as it turned out, I won in a landslide. There were 6 people running because I was running against I was replacing the longest serving sheriff in Arizona history. So everybody wanted to run, everybody and their brother. But I won. I got 4 times as many votes as the guy who came in second place. So ultimately it didn't hurt me when I took the position to promote freedom. Yeah.
So your vision was to give everybody freedom, and in a county that you said that is 98% Latino, you had sent me the link to the corrido that you had. And how does that come about? Someone calls you and says, hey, or you just get hey, check it out. How does that go down? Because just so like something when people tell me, oh, what do you want your legacy to be, right? And I always say, well, I always want to have like good family stuff and all these. But at the end, I always kind of throw, and I hope one day El Pueblo can write a corrido about me that's about the good stuff, that I did. You already got one already. You got one for trying to run for sheriff, but you're way ahead of the game. How does that go down?
El ambiente acá es poco diferente del mundo de los medios de comunicación. Like, this is really weird, Carlos. Like, it would make a weird reality show during my campaign, since there's no English media here in my town. There used to be when I grew up, but now all the radio, the TV stations, everything is all Spanish. And most people get their news from Nogales, Sonora, which is in Mexico. Yo vivo en una ciudad que desafortunadamente es dividida por la frontera, pero lleva el mismo nombre en los dos lados. It's Nogales, Arizona, and Nogales, Mexico, Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. It's like one big city with the same name on both sides. It's not like El Paso and Ciudad Juarez or Brownsville and Reynosa. It's not like that. It's the same city name on both sides of the border. So most of my voters listen to the media coming out of Mexico. So I would be crossing every week into Mexico to do interviews on the Spanish radio stations in Mexico and the TV station and Spanish media on this side of the border. I remember I'd campaigned for 9 months, and the first English speech I did was to the Rotary Club here in Nogales, Arizona. It's like all my door knocking and everything. La mayoría de tocando puertas, hablando gente, buscando firmas para la petición fue totalmente en español. Like almost all of my door knocking, my campaigning was in Spanish. So, and I did that to demystify myself, so people would know I'm from here, I'm from the border, I'm a family from here. A lot of people knew that already. But hablando del corrido, me acercó a group called Conjunto Agua Fría about making that corrido, and they did a real good job on it. I gave them some basic outlines of what I wanted it to say. They said, that they would do this corrido for me for my campaign, and I said, look, tell them that I want to get along with people on both sides of the border, los dos lados de la frontera, all positive messaging, no crisis, because most of the times when a politician runs for office, like a sheriff, they talk about the sky is falling. It's a crisis. We need more DUI checkpoints. We need a bigger drug war. We need this. We need more positions. We need more people. Mine was the opposite. Un mensaje puro positivo, just totally positive messaging. I never talked about a crisis, that we need a bigger drug war, we need more DUI checkpoints, anything like that. Just positive. And it was an experiment. I hoped it would work. I mean, do you have to say that everything's a crisis? And you probably know this, but the formula for all government operation, it doesn't matter if you're talking about coronavirus, global warming, drug war, the way government operates is they articulate a crisis and they present themselves as the solution to the crisis. The world is a scary place. You need me to solve your problem. Whereas I have total confidence in free markets and capitalism, total confidence that the private market can solve anything. But basically, that's how the corrido came to pass. Is during the campaign period, I campaigned for a year and a half, and I did a lot of it on Spanish media. And then I was approached by that group called Conjunto Agua Fría, and it's a very typical. They call it around here norteño, like that style of music. The accordion and the kind of the ballad. So they're sort of telling a story. Y dicen que es de una familia de rancheros, that I'm from a cowboy family and all that. They did a real good job, and it fit that flavor of the norteña style of a corrido.
Yeah, and then so after your victory, and when you articulated the message of freedom, was it well received, or like you said, you had to first, like, what was your strat? Like you had to, you said demystify, but really kind of when you said that, I feel like you're the white guy, right? Running, right? So you kind of have to, like, I mean, I don't know if that's what you meant, but it's kind of like, hey, I'm approachable, or I can hang with you, or hey, right, we can party together. I don't know,
Yeah.
And then, but when you started talking like about that message, was it well received, or were people hungry for it, or was it that they just liked your honesty, or what was it?
Yeah.
What grabbed people to you, towards you?
I think a combination of different things. Like I think, like we were talking off air a little bit, Carlos, before we went on air, I think the Hispanic people naturally hunger for liberty. If you look at the names, a lot of the streets in like Mexico, they say Libertad and things like that, Independencia. But for the most part, they want to keep their heads down and they don't want to get in trouble. So a lot of the people that wore the mask, they're doing it just because they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to be seen as a problem. But yeah, on the demystifying my part, I'm a big guy. I'm a tall guy. I'm 6 feet 4 inches. I weigh 240 pounds, and I could be perceived as an outsider in this area. A lot of the families knew the family name, and or they went to high school with me, or I had worked together with different ones of these people. But it was exactly that. It was old school campaign, knocking on doors, just like Ron Paul. They said he would wear out 4 pairs of shoes every campaign season, just old school campaign style, knock on doors. My wife went with me, my family went with me, my children would knock on doors too. And also the Hispanic community likes this feeling of family, like there's this family unity and closeness. They saw my family out with me, they saw my wife with me knocking on doors. And I started in Spanish at every house, unless they changed it to English in the communities that are, strongly Hispanic, Spanish speaking. And it was some of that, like, I am the big, tall gringo, but then I'm from here. So to demystify myself for the people that didn't know me, go approach them, knock on thousands of doors. And my wife, bless her heart, and my daughter, they wrote thousands of letters to everybody that signed our petition. Like, we had a certain number of petition signatures that we had to get. And some politicians act like, oh, that's a curse that you have to get those signatures. But I treated it as an opportunity. I got 10 times as many signatures as I needed to have for the petition. Why? Because they have to put their address down when they sign. And then my wife stayed up to midnight every night, writing handwritten letters to all the people that we talked to every day. And nobody gets a letter anymore, Carlos. Everybody gets text message, email, social media, direct message, private messaging. So people would come up and hug my wife when they saw her in the supermarket and say, oh man, I still have your letter. I never get a letter. A lot of people of the newer generation have never gotten a handwritten letter before. It wasn't photocopy. It wasn't a form letter. It was written to them personally. And my wife would talk about what we had discussed, like, how's your daughter? How's your family doing? Something personal to that conversation. So that really sealed the deal for us. Now, I don't know if you could campaign that way for a big position, like for Congress or for senator or something like that, but it definitely worked here at the local level to actually not just rely on signs and billboards and radio ads, newspaper ads, but go in person and knock on doors. But it was received very positively. Like, people that seem like that message of freedom resonates with people. They don't react. Now, the media reacted negatively. When I was doing my campaign, there was a debate, a candidate forum, where all 6 candidates were debating, and they had the head judge for the county, Superior Court judge of the county. That's the trial court judge. He was the moderator. He asked the questions. So they gave each of the candidates 1 minute to respond. And they got to the inevitable question about masks, because they had just made a mask order here in this county. And they asked each sheriff candidate, if you're elected and somebody refuses to put on the mask, are you going to cite them or force them or arrest them? And every one of the other candidates said yes, they would cite the person, they would arrest them. I was the last one of the candidates to get that question, and I had 1 minute to answer. And I said, no, I would not charge anybody, arrest anybody. People may have health concerns about wearing a mask. And I also got into First Amendment issues, because the county order and the city order here also said that you could not get together with 10 or more people without getting permission from the government. So, and all the churches have shut down. So that's a direct violation of the First Amendment, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. So I made a point of that. And the local newspaper, very, very leftist focus, they tried to crucify me on that, and they wrote these hit articles on me saying how I was wrong to oppose the mask. There are no health concerns. And it's funny, it set the record, Carlos, for the most number of comments on the online edition of that article. Like, their articles usually get no comments or 1 or 2. There was more than 300 comments on that article, the online version of that newspaper article, where they tried to crucify me. And my friends saw that and they said, David, yeah, wow, you just cost yourself the election. You should have just gone with the flow, just say what everybody else says. And I'm like, no, if the people are so dumb that I'm going to lose over that, then I should lose.
Can you give a historical framing of the office of the sheriff? From I guess I would, a good point to start, and then everything in between, and what it kind of means today, and what your scope is. But like, from like the Magna Carta and everything in between, I've heard you kind of give some historical takes on it, and I think my audience might it'll do them good to know what the office of the sheriff really is about.
Yeah, in the era of the founding fathers of this country, everything was modeled after English common law. So, like you say, back to the Magna Carta. In England, the only office of law enforcement was for the sheriff. That was for civil or criminal or anything like that. It could be a property dispute. And then that was carried over into the US under English common law. There was no such thing as police departments, none of these three-letter federal agencies, FBI, DEA, ATF, all the CIA and things like that. None of that was envisioned in the founding fathers. In the first 100 years of this country, or more than 100 years, almost 150 years, there was only the sheriff. And it was not a patrol function either. It's not like the sheriff would go patrol the county looking for crime. It's like if you had a dispute with your neighbor, that you sold your neighbor a cow and the neighbor never paid for it, they could present that case to the judge to decide what to do with that, and then the judge could give an order to the sheriff, which is an officer of the court, to go retrieve the cow and return it to the rightful owner. Now, in England in the 1800s, there was a guy named Robert Peel. He invented the modern police department. So when you hear about police departments, they have no constitutional authority or authority under common law, but this guy, Robert Peel, made in England the London Police Department. And then that was replicated in the US. Some big cities like New York and Chicago, they got their own police departments. And these people are not elected, so they're not accountable to you. The sheriff is elected, so you can go spit in his face or make him answer your questions, and he can't hide from you. Or you can just say, I'm going to kick you out of office. I'm going to vote against you. But all these police chiefs, they're just appointed by the mayor. All these federal agencies like DEA, ATF, Border Patrol. Here in my community, I have the biggest Border Patrol office in the whole United States and the third biggest office in my county. And we have the biggest ports of entry with Mexico in my county. But back to the history of the office of the sheriff, these federal agencies don't have to be accountable. Like I've talked to some weeks I do more than 20 interviews a week. I talk with all the major national networks like Fox News, PBS, NBC, PBS, ABC, NBC, whatever, with all of them, and also all the Spanish networks like Telemundo, Univision, Azteca TV. I've done ride-along interviews with all of them, and almost the exclusive reason they contact me is to talk about border issues. Now, the border is a federal issue, but the reason they talk to me is Border Patrol will not give them interviews. The local federal agencies will not give them an interview because it's their policy to refer everything to the public information officer in Washington. Now, I need to be transparent. As the elected sheriff, I have to talk to everybody. If I don't, it looks like I have something to hide. So it's kind of weird that I've become an expert on the border issues and the border statistics. And there's so much fuzzy math and so much lying about the border, trying to get everybody into some border hysteria. But I actually have become the spokesman in this area. And also there's a group called the Law Enforcement Immigration Task Force. I become their spokesman too, because I've been required to deal with so many interviews about the border. It was nothing I never expected. That was the biggest surprise being sheriff, that they want to interview me, but they don't care anything about the county issues, like what I do as the county sheriff. They just want to know about the border issues. So I'll always do my best to do positive messaging, to tell everybody the crime rates are really low on the border. What you're hearing about caravans and invasion and all this nonsense, it's a bunch of lies, and I can prove it through statistics. I've made myself memorize the statistics because I get asked these things every week. Like I just did a ride along with Telemundo this week, and I've done with all the other networks. It's a continual thing, but that's something that I consider to be a fortunate, unexpected thing, is I've become kind of an informal spokesman about the truth of the border, of what's going along on the border.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get into the border stuff. I mean, you wrote a book, and you were basically having the two spectrums of like the individual and the national border debate. So if you can, since, you're talking about how you do these ride along, well, you have a relationship with the media on both sides, I guess. What are let's see here. Let's see. So the question is basically, it's kind of a narrative question. So what is the narrative that you understand it to be for the American side, the Mexican side, and then on the American side, like the difference between a Fox News interview and another time, like the two sides, and then what is really going on the streets that you're seeing, because the narratives are what get people emotionally invested in, just like in Latino culture, the novelas will capture somebody. All they need to see is one episode, and they're hooked for months. So the narrative of the border issue is very important. What are the narratives that are competing with each other? And I just recently did an interview with this guy named Wilfred Riley, and he basically says that no, you know what, they don't have this conspiracy agenda. They really just are playing to their crowd, and they're trying to get clicks. Like, it's just monetary. But sometimes I feel like, no, there's probably something more to it. But I don't know. What is your take on all these competing narratives, and then how they play out with policy, and then what is actually going on the streets, like at the street level?
Yeah. Well, that is actually so true. They know their voter base. We have a lot of retired people here in Arizona. And if the county has a sheriff with a lot of retired people, it's easy to scare old people for some reason. They moved in from Ohio or from Michigan, and they move here to Arizona because the climate's good. And these sheriffs will know that you scare the people and talk about an invasion or something like that, and they'll vote for you. And one thing I want to say before I get going on this answer is the thing about the telenovelas is so true about when somebody wants to learn Spanish, I tell them to start watching a Spanish soap opera, because you'll get hicked, you get connected into it. It's the story. There's a lot of humor, a lot of emotion, the slapstick, and the aggressive personalities and everything. And once you learn, this guy's an engineer, that guy is the empleada, she cleans the house. This guy is going to dental school. That you can build on the understanding. But yeah, I'm going to hit on what you said bit by bit. Like you mentioned, my book. This is that book, and if I haven't sent you a copy, I will. It's a very niche book. It's called Immigration: Individual versus National Borders. The purpose of that book, it's a very niche book, meaning it's never going to have a wide audience. That it bothered me, Carlos, that within the libertarian community, and I know that all your audience aren't libertarians. Tienes también los primos, las tías, los tíos. You got some of just your friends that like boxing. I grew up with the same boxing tradition that you did. My dad was a boxer and also an attorney. But anyway, it wasn't written for a big audience. It was written for these kind of libertarian intellectuals that think that they have a reason to keep the state involved in border enforcement. They hate the government involvement, taxpayer funded involvement in anything else in their life. But for some reason, they still think you need border patrol, you need state employees, you need law enforcement officers busting heads at the border. And some of those people, unfortunately, are Austrian economists. And I love Austrian economics. Murray Rothbard, Ludwig von Mises. I've written a lot of articles for LouRockwell.com, Bob Murphy. I love all these guys that are Austrian economists. But some of them, inexplicably, I don't understand, have come up with this idea that we still need the state involved in border enforcement. So that's why I wrote that book. It's for libertarians that are scratching their head and wondering, why do some libertarians still want the government involved, taxpayer funded border enforcement? But just to get off that topic and back to your general question about the narrative of what's really going on the border.
We could jump back into that, because it'd be good to get the two sides, and then, but yeah.
Yeah, and we can definitely get into that. Like, I've done some interviews specifically on that, of what the fallacies are in the free market economists, the few, and it's not all of them. It's not all Austrian economists, but some of them have come down on the side of still needing the state involved in border enforcement. So I take the other side on that issue. But back to what's really going on the border. There's a lot of fuzzy math. It's really crazy. It's like, once Biden became president, then the narrative kind of shifted. But they say the general narrative is this, that, under a Democrat president, there's going to be an invasion. And under a Republican president, everything's great on the border. So it's become like party politics. But the truth of the matter is this: regardless of whether it's Democrat or Republican presidents, if you look at the statistics, and I have all the statistics printed out, practically every year in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 2000s, the apprehensions at the southwest border by Border Patrol were over a million, apprehensions per year. Now, that was for almost 3 decades. Now, that was during Reagan, during Clinton, during Bush, and then the previous 14 years leading up to this last year when I became sheriff, there was no year that had a million apprehensions. So there was a 14 years in a row where Obama was president for 2 terms for 8 years, Trump was president for 4 years, and there was not a single year where there was a million apprehensions. Most years were under 500,000, well under 500,000. So, and that was with both Democrat and Republican presidents. So there's a lot of fuzzy math involved there. And then what happened last year is they closed the legal ports of entry to the legal visa holders. There's visas they call tourist visas, student visas. There's estimated to be 4 million people in Mexico that have legal visas to come into the US, B1 and B2 visas. So they said, because of coronavirus, because of all this nonsense, this scam, we're going to close the border down to all the legal shoppers. These are people that worked in the US and they had family on both sides of the border and they shopped here. And the border communities depend on these shoppers, on this traffic coming back and forth. Like it's very, on Fox News and people like Trump, they like to say, oh, they're all murderers and rapists and drug dealers and all that. But when they shut down the border to the legal crossers, these are people that had their visas. The 4 border states, Texas, New Mexico, and California and Arizona, on a typical year, they receive $55 million every single day of shoppers bringing money in from Mexico, shopping in the US. They would prefer to shop in the US. And Mexico is a very important trading partner to the US. Like, Trump and Fox News would try to make Mexico look as bad as possible, as diabolic as possible. But of Mexico's foreign GDP, the part that they don't consume in the country, the goods and services that aren't consumed in Mexico, 80% of their GDP goes to the US. It's trade with the US. When you spend $1 in Mexico, 40 cents out of every dollar comes back to the US. Now, if you spend $1 to a company in China, about 4 cents comes back to the US. So it's a very important trading partner with the US. The economy, it's a very symbiotic relationship. So let me get back to the immigration statistics. So they shut down these legal visa holders for 1.5 years where they couldn't cross the border to go shopping or to reunite with their families, to go visit their relatives in Mexico. So this put more pressure on people to cross between the ports of entry. People cross, not going through the actual ports of entry, through the legal ports of entry. And so this caused an increase in the statistics. And then they didn't process the people when Border Patrol picked them up. They would you've probably heard of Title 42. It's like this health type deportation process where they would just immediately deport them without any processing. And then 40% of the crossings in the last year and a half were repeat crossings where the same people just kept coming across. And a lot of them actually had their visas to come in. They were just prevented by the US government from coming in. But then this created a statistic that made it look like, oh, we have a bigger problem at the border. We have a bigger problem of people coming across the border. And of course, these people coming in, statistically, people who are native-born Americans are 3 times as likely to apply for welfare benefits than somebody coming in from Mexico. They're coming in looking for work and coming to do something productive into the economy, and that's an actual statistic. So they'll make it sound like, oh, these people are coming in to get on the welfare rolls and to vote for socialist candidates, when actually they're way less likely to apply for welfare benefits. So that in a nutshell is it. I may remember some more aspects as we go along, but there's a lot of fuzzy math, like under both Democrat and Republican presidents during almost every year of the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s. the apprehension rates at the border were high, were over 1 million. And then for the previous 14 years before the last year, they were all low, under 500,000. And that was under both Democrat and Republican presidents during both periods. And if another thing, if I could just point something else out about statistics, the size of the Border Patrol has increased 5 times since 1990. In 1990, the Border Patrol had 4,000 agents. Now they have 20,000 agents, so a 500% increase. And the apprehensions per agent are way down. But people want to make it sound like it's, oh, this huge problem, that the numbers went up some last year. Another thing that's happened is the population of the United States from 1990 till today has gone up 90 million people. And the population of Mexico from 1990 till today has gone up 50 million people. So everything's bigger. Population has gone up in Mexico and the United States. The Border Patrol is a lot bigger. But when we start approaching some of those same levels that you saw in the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s of Border Patrol apprehensions, people will say, oh, this is a crisis. This is invasion. And I live right along the border. I can see the hills in Mexico from my house. Me and my wife and my family, we walk every night along the border. And it's very calm and tranquil and peaceful. There's not hordes of people coming across. But this narrative works politically. It's like your friend that you had on the podcast that says they know their voter base. That's it. There's other sheriffs here along the border that know their voter base, and so they try to scare the people. And while I'm talking about the border, if I could mention one of the things I've been able to do to stand up to this nonsense, Governor Ducey, the governor in Arizona, said, he's one of these guys that wants to run for president in 2024. So he wants there to be a border crisis. He's declared emergency on the border. So he says, I'm going to send the National Guard down to the border counties in Arizona. But there's a law in the United States called the Posse Comitatus law that says the military cannot function as police. They cannot function as domestic police in the US. So in order for them to send National Guard to the border, they had to get the sheriff, who's the chief law enforcement officer for the county, from the 4 border counties to invite them in. So I got a call from the general who's in charge of the National Guard for Arizona and said, how many troops do you want down on the border? And I said, none. I don't want any. I'm not going to allow you to send troops to the border. So my county and one other county, we refused the troops to come to the border. And there were 2 other counties, unfortunately, that are these crisis type sheriffs. They said, oh yeah, send them down here and make it look like it's more of a disaster. But my merchants in my county and my retail district right along the border, they would hate the idea of having guys in camouflage with machine guns and Humvees and military vehicles occupying my city and make it look like a war zone. That would hurt our economy. And our economy was already hurt severely. And a lot of businesses closed up when they closed down the border from the visa holders from Mexico, where they couldn't come across to shop. But that's one little thing I was able to do to stop the nonsense. I told the governor, no, you cannot send any National Guard to my county because I'm not going to allow them to be here. And the only way he could send them is to have them be in a support role for the sheriff's office. And I told him, no, I don't want them, because I don't want this to be a war zone like East Berlin, And it's funny how the Republican Party has changed their tune in the last 30 years. Like in 1989, you had President Reagan stand in front of the Berlin Wall in East Berlin and told the Russian President Gorbachev, the Premier Mikhail Gorbachev, tear down this wall. You say that you're emerging from tyranny, from dictatorship. Walls are symbols of oppression. Tear down this wall if you want to say that you're going to emerge into freedom, into liberty. But it's funny, like the same political party 30 years later is saying, build the wall. And I know I've been talking on a long stretch here, but if I could say one more thing that's really going to shock your viewers. About 10 years ago, there was a pilot program that started here on the border where Border Patrol and CBP, they now search the cars that are leaving the United States, going into Mexico. This is U.S. federal officials searching your car and taking your money. If you go into Mexico, they won't arrest you for a crime, but they take your money and they make you prove whether the source of that was drug dealing or if you have tax records to show that you earned that legitimately. That's the same thing, Carlos, that happened in East Berlin. That wall was ultimately used to keep people from leaving East Germany, leaving and going to a freer country. So I tell everybody that wants the wall, I say, look, walls don't just keep people out. They keep you from leaving. If you ever decide it's too oppressive here and you don't have enough freedom in the US and you want to leave and go live in Mazatlan or Guaymas or, Puerto Peñasco, and there's big American communities down in Mexico, just south of here. If you want to leave, that wall is keeping you out, and they're now searching the cars and the people that leave the US going into Mexico. And that was never happening before. And now that's a permanent thing. When it was 10 years ago, it was a pilot project. Now they have these search stations permanently set up going into Mexico. And here's something I did. I'm showing you a newspaper article for the ones that are looking this on in video. There's been a bunch of these examples recently. I had to do a lot of news interviews about this. This somebody crashing through the gate going south into Mexico, like an American going into Mexico, and they're not allowed to go into Mexico without the American officers searching them. So if you don't have a wall, it's like a safety valve where you can leave this country more easily. But like in East Berlin, they had a wall where their citizens couldn't leave. And people don't think about it that way. But when you cut yourself off from the rest of the world and you make a wall, then your own government can keep you from leaving, and they can steal your gold coins or your money when you're leaving the US. But yeah.
Hey, what's up? If you're listening to this ad spot, it's probably because you're halfway through the show, which means that you like what I'm doing, which means that if you also want to support what I'm doing, you can check out palomaverdecbd.com. That is the official sponsor of the show. It is also a company that my wife and I run out of our home. It is a premium grade CBD company where you can get all of your CBD products that you need, from tinctures, salves, soft gels, pet products. And we have some new products, which are massage oils and bath bombs. So if you are looking for any type of CBD products and also want to support the show, visit palomaverdecbd.com. Use the promo code Chingazos, CHINGASOS, for 20% off anything off the store, off your order. So please visit palomaverdecbd.com. Appreciate the support. Peace.
Yeah, so that's one of the issue. One of the topics and issues, and a little bit of part of my agenda that, in the libertarian world, there's this divide, and some of the podcasters that are going to come hang out here with us here on May 7th, they have come from, I guess you would want to say, like the open borders type to now, I guess they call it more like the Hoppian style thinking of like their, covenant communities and keep everybody, something like that. And so,
and that's what my book is about. There's a lot of quotes from Hans Hermann Hoppe and Murray Rothbard, where Hoppe on everything else was against the state. He said, the state is just, it's Murray Rothbard said it's a gang of thieves. Hoppe said that there's no legitimacy for anything the state does. But on that one thing, they suggest state border. And that's why I wrote that, because I really respect these guys, like the people that follow Hoppe and Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises. I really respect them, and I think they got it right on everything. And that Austrian economist, that Hoppian perspective, what they believe is that you don't prescribe actions. You let the free market determine what is needed in every area. The free market can figure out anything, but in that one area, they prescribe what should be done. They prescribe that you should have controlled borders, but that's not necessarily the outcome of a free market. You have things like HOAs and things like that can exist if there's a market demand for them. But even on that, I address that in my book. These covenant communities like HOAs, most of them in the US came into existence because of the FHA and VA loan requirements that says you can't get a loan for a house in a new subdivision unless you have an HOA. And most of those HOAs, there's just sources of controversy. There's people fighting who wants to be the board president of the HOA. And most people don't like the politics and they don't like the HOA political structure, but they're forced into it by the government, the FHA and the VA loan requirements. And most loans are FHA and VA loans. But I cover all that in that book because that really bugged me. And like you said, a lot of these people that were kind of open border types, now they're thinking, well, Hapa, he sounds like a smart guy. So I'm just going to adopt that. And now that's my excuse to, be against people coming across the border.
Is it simply that, or is it that it's playing a little bit to, the fear of the others might be a nice way of putting it, but is it something else?
Yeah.
Is it something else? What is it? Because I never want to say, hey, like all of these homies that are going to come hang out, I don't got no beef with them, but yeah, I kind of was like, but why on this one? Why on this little thing, and what do you think it is? Because there's something there, that I don't like, but I want to help, not, change it more towards our direction, I guess, a little bit,
Well, you're right. You don't want to do name calling, but it is a fear of the other. I like to put it this way, like it's always acceptable to criticize the foreigner, criticize people outside your country. Like, for example, Hitler, when World War II started, he could criticize Poland and he said, Poland's a threat to the fatherland. He could criticize them because they were a different country. It was a foreigner. It's the unknown. So he invaded Poland after saying that they're a threat. Now, in this country, you can criticize anything a foreigner does. You can criticize, like I'm older than you. I grew up during the Vietnam War. You can criticize the Vietnamese. You can criticize North Korea, Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and you can come up with all these crazy stuff. You criticize Mexico and Guatemalans because it's criticizing the foreigner. Now, that debate is allowed to happen, but if you will get deplatformed if you start criticizing some American policy. If you start criticizing some American war or some American COVID type policy. So it is a lot of that is the fear of the unknown. And I don't know if I can show you this, but I have a frame thing on my wall that shows that exact idea. I'm going to try to show it to you. It's a picture that I have on the wall that shows this idea of, I don't know if I have that. Can you kind of see it? Yeah. It's this idea that you're in your country. It has like a castle, and it's a mirror image on both sides.
A little bit to one side. You're kind of on the middle there. There you go. A little bit better
there. Which way should I go?
The other way.
That way.
Yeah.
Okay. So it says it's a mirror image of two countries, and it's saying on the one side, on your side, it says our glorious leader in the castle. The other side says their wicked despot. Then there's a picture of a church type building and it says our great religion, and the mirror image in the other country says their primitive superstition. And then there's a picture of the people and it says our noble populace in your side, and in the other country it says their backward savages, and for your military it says our heroic adventurers, and for the other military it says their brutish invaders. So it's like it's that exact idea that you're saying, this kind of fear of the unknown, of the stranger. You're always allowed to criticize a foreigner, but because that's your government will allow you to do that. They don't want you. We supposedly have the ability to criticize the government in this country, but in actuality, you can see the last 2 years, if you criticize the policies used against you, you'll be shut down and you'll be criticized. Like if they want to do a new war against Ukraine, if the US government wants to gin up a war with Ukraine, you're criticized if you're on the wrong side of that issue, but you're allowed to hate foreigners. So I think that's kind of what's behind a lot of this, Carlos, is the Mexicans are the unknown. They're the foreigners. So you can say that they're evil and that they're savages, but this country has demonized in its past. We've demonized Germans and Japanese and Irish and Chinese. That's why Border Patrol started. Oh, these Chinese, they're all evil, and they're evil and satanic, and they're going to steal all our jobs. You go through the list, Irish, Italians, Mexicans, Japanese, Chinese, Iraqis, Iranians. in this country have been demonized as, they're going to hurt us, they're going to destroy our country, they're going to overthrow us. And it's been, like you said, I would rather not call names and say that people on the other side are, I don't want to say that they're bad people. I think there is another explanation. And I think that is a big part of it, that you're allowed to criticize the people on the line on the other side of the map. That's the source of all our problems. Even though Mexicans come here and work hard and contribute a lot to the economy, it's easier to have this us against them mentality. And I don't want to too casually say that there's a racial element to it, but on the other hand, people don't talk about building a wall on the Canadian border. They'll talk about that on the Mexican border. And so it makes you wonder, it makes you wonder if there's something else, like, I don't want to accuse people of that, but that's kind of the sentiment that you get.
Yeah, no, I try to fight back without saying something. So like we have like Texas nationalists, I'm like a Texas nationalist, and they'll talk about, once we secede, we can do our own border with Mexico. And then I'll say, hey, if you're going to put a border on the south, you better put a border on the north to keep all the northerners out. I'm not for that, but I just say that. I was like, hey, we don't want those northern rapists and drug dealers and stuff to come in. And they just kind of like throws them like they never even conceived that, if you're going to put on one on the south, why not on the north? Like it's, so yeah, they don't even know that they're like doing the fear of others. And once you become your own state, well, then the others can become now right above, like the northern states. And it just doesn't calculate into their mind. But yeah, I like to think that it's mostly that, but also it, I don't know, it could be easier. It's easier for someone for like me to not have that, or for us, right, to not have this where the border is a little bit more porous culturally and stuff, because I would go, a lot of my family is from Mexico, so they come, they hang out. I like to have people come over to party with me on these these days of the big fights and all that, and the people that can, because they have their travel visa or their permiso to come in. They come hang out, my primos and all that, but I have other primos that just can't come over because they don't have this special permission. And I always tell everybody, because, they like through my podcast, I kind of, obviously put out there that I like to party and hang out. And I'm like, hey, you're telling me that I can't hang out with my primos that are from Mexico. Like, I want to have them over to hang out and party. And I was like, why not? And, just stuff like that. And so I it's a little blind spot that I hope that, they come away from it. But it'll definitely be a topic that I will bring up with these guys here that weekend. And yeah, for sure, you being there that weekend will definitely you'll be on my side a little bit to help me, because they're gonna have their arguments for sure. And I never try to be super like confrontational. I'm like, yeah, man, I guess so. Yeah, some of that stuff is like, because they would say different, so actually you could speak to the fallacies and some of the arguments that they would make.
I can speak to it from an economic perspective about the exact arguments that Hoppe uses and Rothbard uses, because I wrote the book on that, about the specific fallacies about what's wrong with their position. Because I have, and I think you do too, I have 100% confidence in the free market to solve any problem. People vote with their dollars. And if you need more of something, you'll get more of that. If you need less of something, you'll get less of that. If something's harmful, the vendor, you track their reputations. You have things like Consumer Reports, Amazon reviews, like things go away and they get less if people don't like them. If they like iPhones, you're going to get a lot more iPhones. People vote with their dollars. And David, I don't think there's,
David, I'm going to interrupt you for just so that way people can have an idea of the free market and the way that just in this topic. So when I was a kid, people would come over from Mexico, but they didn't have they had Mexican licenses, but they didn't have like US car insurance. So the market over the years, you started seeing these like, hey, even if they would just give anybody really insurance as long as you were paying your monthly general liability stuff. So when people would get stopped by, the regular cops or sheriff, I remember my uncles and stuff say, oh, they stopped me and no, I just got to go pay. I just got to go pay the ticket. As long as I had insurance, and I had my license from Mexico, they didn't, take me to. So like the market kind of saw this weird space of, hey, well, they're here. Sometimes they're having crashes. There's no insurance. So we'll start, offering insurance to anybody that's going to. So I remember that was something of an idea where I kind of was like, that's the market kind of. So now in 2022, from like the 20 years when I kind of started noticing that the growth of it, yeah, you see people, everybody now has insurance that might have not had insurance 20, 30 years ago. And that was and then now people that are from here, if they get in a crash with some of these people that have, that probably shouldn't be here or whatever, the insurance covers it and not pedo, right? Everybody kind of, as long as they have insurance. So that was kind of one little, I was just trying to put that in there that me, at least that was a kind of like the market inserting itself in this place where there was money to be made. There was a way to service different aspects of like the government side by, not having the headaches of having people that don't have insurance, but they probably wanted to buy insurance 20, 30 years ago, but there was probably this weird space of where you couldn't get it or whatever. But anyway, that was just kind of an example that I know of, like how I've seen it change over the years.
And back to the debate, like you said, and like before we went on air, I was telling you, I was looking at the video of your estadio, your little stadium you're building. That's great. And I can anticipate the event. Back to the debate that libertarians have, like there was one between Dave Smith and Spike Cohen, both, I think, running for vice president in the Libertarian Party, but vice presidential candidates. And I was helping, Spike Cohen prep on that debate. And I went on his podcast and discussed that very subject, the details of the economic reasons about why it's wrong that you need to have enforced borders, that you should be able to have a border around your property, Carlos, that you can invite anybody in or exclude anybody from coming in, but there should not be another force, a third party, like let's call him Darth Vader. Darth Vader should not be able to make a circle around all of our properties and say, nobody can come across that. It's a false argument. People will say, well, you can keep somebody from coming into your house, so you can keep somebody from coming in your country. But what if I want to invite somebody to work on my ranch from Nogales, Sonora, Mexico, to come work on my ranch in the United States? And so I'm welcoming them onto my land, but what gives somebody else the right to make another border around my land, which is right near the border, to put another, like I'll just use the word Darth Vader. Why can Darth Vader come in and say, yeah, you have the right to welcome them onto your land, but I get to say, no, you cannot welcome them onto your land. It's unjust and it's unfair. And you have people that would travel that have, it's a free interaction on both sides. There's somebody in the US that will rent them a house or hire them for a job, or they're going to, marry your daughter, or you're going to buy things from them or sell things to them. It's a voluntary transaction, 100% voluntary. There's nobody forcing themselves onto your property or into your house. But what gives anybody the right to force you to keep you from having a voluntary transaction with somebody?
Yeah, I always, no, I mean, I agree. And the one that I always tend to like kind of, talk a little bit about is like, you said like the daughter is like, it's the one about like love. Like when some people that, if you're a hard anti-immigrant, whatever you want to, whatever, like a hardliner, and your daughter falls in love with somebody that is all of the characteristics and values of somebody that you would want your daughter to, but they're just missing a piece of paper from this Darth Vader entity that says that they're not, what are you going to do? And that always happens. That always, are you really going to say, oh, Mika, he's perfect, but, or not Mika, that guy wouldn't talk, but, hey, he's perfect, but except for that, so, hey, I got to disown you because, no, so a lot of that always, it rubs me the wrong way, but also, man, it's, but, nobody's perfect and everybody always, and there's things that maybe I'm hypocritical on some issues and, so, we can all just try our best, but yes, I'm in agreement with you on all that. Now, Spike Cohen was someone that I interviewed too when he was running for, he was already the VP candidate. And something that I had brought up with him, which I'd like to get your take, especially with your DEA background, is all of the like blowback from our interventions through the drug war, of a lot of this immigration issues through the drug war and all that. So, you mentioned some of the countries that you were in during your career. Can you speak to that a little bit of of the blowback and the unintended consequences that happen from
Yeah.
our, drug war in South America, Central and South America?
Yeah. Well, it's funny, like we should have learned our lessons from alcohol prohibition. Alcohol prohibition went from 1920 to 1933. And you never had gang activity before that or drive-by shootings before that in the US. That was a direct result of driving a market underground, where the market for alcohol was driven underground. So what did that cause to happen? You had clashes between the police and alcohol distribution organizations, clashes between rival gangs, rival organizations. And one of the worst results of that was the beginning of gun control in the US. Before alcohol prohibition, there was no gun control. But in the year 1933, they drafted the National Firearms Act, which passed in 1934. And it was a direct result of alcohol prohibition, because they noticed when you drive a market underground, just like with drugs, when they drove the market for alcohol underground, there was a big increase in violence and clashes with people shooting guns at each other and whatnot. So that was the first where it became illegal to have a short barrel shotgun, a short barreled rifle, to have a full automatic weapon. Before that, anybody could have, like my dad had like a Thompson submachine gun, before then. And a lot of people did, they had so what? You have a full automatic weapon, or you have a silencer or something like that, things that are now illegal. That increased the power of the state directly because of alcohol prohibition. So it caused another problem. So you see that same thing in Mexico. There's two things that really don't mix: drug prohibition and gun prohibition, where guns are generally illegal in Mexico, as are drugs. So that makes a horrible situation where you drive this industry underground. There's going to be clashes between rival gangs and the police, but the regular people, it's illegal for them to own a gun. So it's hard for them to defend themselves. If you can own a gun, then you can defend yourself from some criminal in your neighborhood. So it's the worst recipe possible. And the US government encourages all that stuff. And then I saw, working in South America, during Reagan's war on drugs, I worked 5 years in Bolivia, 3 years in Paraguay, where I actually lived there with my family, but I worked all around South America and all the different countries in South America. You could just see the futility of all that, trying to control a substance. If there's a demand for something, the demand is going to be met. You could try to go after one group, and then another group will pop up, and then it drives up the price of drugs, which the enforcers will act like that's a sign of success, that the prices are going up, but then it makes it more lucrative for other people to get involved, because they can get richer if they get involved. So it's a never-ending cycle. And if I can use a little analogy on the drug war with the immigration thing, another thing that I don't like about the whole immigration position of trying to use a state solution to close the borders, you don't create one state program to solve a problem caused by another state program. Like people say that we have welfare in the United States so that people might want to come in from foreign countries to sign up for welfare, for food stamps and free medical care and things like that. So what they'll do is, the bad problem, the program that should not exist, is the welfare. The welfare should not exist. But what they'll do, instead of saying, let's make welfare go away and just let private humanitarian groups, churches and stuff help people that are down on their luck, instead of saying, let's make the first state program go away, they propose another state program called border enforcement to fix the problem caused by the first state program. And in the drug war, you could see the same thing. Like when I ran a drug task force in the US, we noticed that the welfare checks came out on the first day of the month. And guess what? The drug shipments increased on the first day of the month. The drug volume went up on the first day of the month. So you could just as easily say, well, welfare is causing an increase in drug usage because people go on welfare, they don't have jobs. Idle hands is the devil's workshop, so they buy more drugs. So you could say, we've noticed that people buy more drugs on the day that the welfare checks come in. Well, then your argument could be, well, let's make a drug war. Let's create something like the DEA to solve the problem created by the welfare check. So that's never a good solution, to say you have one state program causing a problem like welfare, and then you say that people are going to come in, although statistically it's not true for the most part. They're coming in to get on welfare. So we need to have something like Border Patrol. We need to steal more tax money from you. We need to force you to pay tax money to create another state agency to stop the people from coming in, even though most of the Republican voters that vote for Build the Wall and all that, they think the problem is that welfare is being a magnet to bring people in. Well, why don't they say, let's get rid of welfare instead of creating another second government program to fix the problem caused by the first government program?
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, it's just yeah, it's just the way it goes with these vatos. So we had spoken about how the Latino culture is a culture that is maybe not hungry for freedom because they've always had it or not had it. What's the like it? You know, it's in their instinct. Like you were saying, like their streets called Libertad. The little backyard stadium that I have is going to be called Estadio Libertad. Um, you know, and a part of what I was trying to do with this podcast and part of my agenda of the show is that I'm trying to tell the libertarians or liberty-minded people on Republicans or whoever that that Latino people are untapped source for trying to get people on our side of the issues. And one of the ways that I like to tell people about this is that, like, I was like, hey man, have you guys ever heard any of our corrido songs? I mean, they're basically like anti-government, running basically product back and forward. I mean, they're basically like, I mean, if these songs were playing in like whether they were rap songs or country songs, I mean, you guys would be like, what's going on with the, you know? But so these guys, you know, they sing these corridos like nothing. And a little bit on our emails back and forth in the last couple of weeks, I sent you one that's one of my favorite one. It's called Capitan Fantasma because it's about this guy, that true story that you know, yeah, he was doing bad things and he should have gone to jail for whatever he was doing, but you know, he had this will to always escape every place that he went to, and that type of will to not have the state enclose them is something that I feel kind of talks to a little bit of what I'm trying to do here. So another one of my corridos that I like, and I hope I'm going to say this with all due respect because I want to be sure that you understand that that's where I'm coming from. But before it's one by Los Invasores called Rafael Caro Quintero, and that is one that is a little interesting because I remember 10 years ago when I was barely like dating my wife, and I would tell her about this corrido, and I was like, yeah. I went down the rabbit hole of like, no. They have they you know, they got this American DEA agent, but he was undercover. But there was other stuff. There was other U.S. stuff that was there. But at that time, there was no Netflix documentaries. There was none of that showed a little bit of a different angle. It was all straight up like Mexican side was bad, U.S. side was good, and so now a little bit with a lot of these Netflix shows and now that, like, you know, actually Rafael Caro Quintero is free somehow through technicalities and all that. My question to you, and like with all due respect, like when, especially since you say you were during the Reagan administration, when all of that stuff with Quique Camarena and all of that went down, how did you take it? What was your narrative at the time? Did you get wrapped up into the, you know, I mean, it's, you know, it was one of your, you know, how did all that go down with you? And now seeing some of the stuff that's come out, like, you know, looking back at it, how do you feel about it?
Well, it's very interesting you say that because I started out, my first assignment with DEA was in Kiki Camarena's office, Calexico, California. And I did a lot of undercover work in Mexicali and Baja California back then. And Kiki had just died right before I hired. And just for some random thing, they assigned me my first office to his office because I think I grew up on the border and I spoke Spanish, but it was unbelievable mess, Carlos, that you almost can't believe, but then maybe you could. Like, for example, Rafael Caro Quintero, you had another U.S. agency called the CIA using his airstrip on his estancia for a staging point to bring the cocaine to the U.S. that was going through South America, Panama, and then to his. And I actually had a CIA pilot come into my office and want to be interviewed and tell me the whole story, and thought that this was crazy how the DEA and CIA were financing both sides in a war, you know, and that was kind of the beginning to see the tip of the iceberg of what a mess it was. The DEA's objective was to prosecute people, and the CIA's objective was to do things like fund a rebellion in Nicaragua and use the funds from the drug trafficking. And I don't know if you've ever read Gary Webb's book about the ultimate cocaine from the CIA arriving in Los Angeles and being sold in the US, but it was such a mess. And it's not just a sensational thing for the movies. It is actually true that the US government is that messed up. And I noticed it in South America too, the same things where we'd be doing investigations. I'm not going to give specifics of names because I think I would get in trouble because of grand jury secrecy rules, where I would be in violation of rules, but where I would be investigating a case with a team of officers, of Bolivian military and police officers, that I ran that group, that task force. And we would find out that we were investigating a group that was being funded and organized by the CIA, another agency in the US Embassy down there. It was such a mess that I was going to say you almost can't believe it, but you probably can, because the government doesn't do anything right. You just go into the motor vehicles department or the post office, and you can just tell the government is inefficient and a mess, whatever they do. And so much of that is secretive in a classified world that a lot of that stuff will never be discovered. Like the US taxpayers will never know what their dollars went to. But when we get together in your estadio, maybe we'll tell some campfire stories of some of the things I went through that are just too insane to believe. But yeah, starting my first assignment in Calexico in the 1980s with DEA, which was Kiki Camarena's office, and he was the one that investigated Rafael Caro Quintero and the Dr. Verdugo and all those ones that were involved with that. Like, you're right, the official narrative was these guys are all bad. They're poisoning the US, they're killing Americans. But then you go find the other side of it, that Caro Quintero was being financed by the CIA to use his ranch and his airstrip in the interior of Mexico as a staging area for the cocaine coming to the US. It's like I say, it's almost beyond belief, but I think you can imagine the reality of that.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate how all that went down, and how a lot of the residuals are still at play from a lot of that even today. So in closing a little bit, I'd like to kind of end on a positive side here a little bit, and that is to kind of speak to the culture of family. Now, you have a big one. Let me see if I got this right. I got this from a little bit of my research here from notes. 9 kids, 7 home births, all homeschooled, I believe. And that doesn't happen without having a champion of a wife. How did you meet your wife, which I'm happy to also be meeting when you guys come in for the party event? Can you kind of tell us the story of that and how that went down? Because you don't go down that many and all this stuff without having some nice foundational pillars between both of you guys.
Yeah, we've just kind of known each other forever. Like, we went to public school in the same town, a little border town, Nogales, Arizona. She went to a different grade school than I did, but I actually met her the first time when she was 10 years old and I was 12 years old, because my older sister and her older brother went to a summer band program, and we would tag along with them, where the band director at the public school would open the room and let the kids play around with the instruments during summer vacation. So I actually met her then. We went to high school together. I was 2 years ahead of her. I graduated class of 1977. She was class of 1979. And then when I was going to college at the U of A, we both worked at the local McDonald's here in the border town, Nogales, Arizona, when I was going to the University of Arizona. And she was actually my manager. She was the assistant manager of the McDonald's. So I've known her and her family.
Oh, so she never stopped being your manager then, right?
Known her on and off through the years. And she is so great and friendly. And she's just a bundle of energy. She never stops moving. She's one of these people that if we go to McDonald's or something and we all sit down, she'll just stand up and wander around. She just she can't sit still. She's always cooking, she's always making things, and she's always giving away food for people. And yeah, the homeschool thing, when we first started that, it was this scary new thing. We started in the 1980s when nobody else was doing it. So you kind of had to hide what you're doing, and we had to invent it for ourselves. And then it became more mainstream in the 1990s. There was more groups and publications, and now it's pretty common. And I would think the state, that's one of the things that they were probably unhappy that got away from them. You know, the whole school thing actually became popular. So now you can do it out in the open. But when we first started, we were worried that people would snitch on us, that our kids were home during the day, or if my wife went to the grocery store in the middle of the day. And there was some of that, like, aren't your kids supposed to be in school? You know, there was some of that. But yeah, she's a trooper, and she's really good and been really supportive. And she's really tiny. She just weighs 94 pounds, but she's just a bundle of energy. She'd probably like that because she's always burning off calories, always moving all the time.
I'm kind of saying that this event is like a pro family, pro liberty, and in those structures of liberty and family, there's always going to be some like tensions. What are some like tips or what were some of y'all's ways of when you guys might have had some tensions? Like, how did you guys work things out? Because it's important for some of my audience to hear some of like, this is the way, just some positive stuff of how sometimes that can go down. Because like I said, we only have two girls, but to have 9 and to make it work somehow, there are always going to be a little bit of tensions. But yeah, just like speak to some of that of like how people should try to be on some of that stuff. Yeah.
Y como se dicen en español, la casa sigue siendo más chica. Ahorita solamente se queda mi hijo menor, que tiene sus 15 años. So we only have the one left at home, but we got a lot of grandkids now. We have like 7 grandkids. And so there's always a birthday or an anniversary coming up all the time. I wish I had a magic tip. Like me and my wife, we take a walk every night, and we've always done that. Like when I get home or we're done doing things, we take a really long walk, sometimes with the kids going along with us. Seems like I can do my best thinking, and we can talk things out better. Things get clearer when you're not sedentary. If you're just sitting there staring at each other, maybe the hostilities can build up more. But that's just like a little minor thing. I imagine that helps some, is just to take a lot of walks or do some physical activity together. Helps clear your mind. And I do a lot of talking when I'm walking. So it's like that, and other than that, I don't really know, just doing family activities together. We didn't always have sit down meals together. We would more just kind of like, just sit in the living room or whatever. We started about 10 years ago trying to have a meal together every day, like dinner, sit down and eat dinner together, talk a little bit about your day. I know that sounds like old fashioned, like 1950s or something, but I think that has worked for us, because sometimes everybody can crawl into their own world, like the kids with their electronic devices, or mom or dad on the internet doing something. And you just realize, man, we haven't spoken together as a family for like 3 days or like a week or something like that. So I think create an opportunity. It could be, doing something like watching sports together, or it could be something just like the family meal, but just kind of schedule an opportunity. If you haven't been doing it, your kids might be, they don't want to do that in the beginning, but they get used to it. Like, make it a routine thing, like something where you're doing something with the family, like sit down with a meal or take a walk together or do some, some sports things or something like that. And we didn't even get into boxing. Can you believe that?
Oh my gosh. We're saving it for the weekend. We're saving it for the party weekend. If you guys got to show up, everybody out there listening. Yeah, no, we're going to definitely get into boxing and stuff like that. But yeah, so yeah, in our culture, or like, boxing weekends was, that's the big thing. And that was one of the big, factors that when I started dating my wife, she had a boxing family culture of, the big fights, they would watch them together. And, even like at that time, I thought this is important to me because I know it brings families together and our family together. So I was already thinking like that already,
Yeah. Yeah, cool. There's so much we could talk about. Like, I made some notes before the show, but there's just no way we could get it to all, like kind of fighting the vaccine passports and all the other things that I've been involved in the sheriff, like, fighting different little battles with the local politicians, but it would go on forever. So
yeah, we'll definitely communicate on the day of the event. So What are your future plans? How much longer of a term do you have? Are you planning to, like, I don't know, like, run again, or like, what are your future plans here?
Yeah, I'm only a little over 1 year into the term. It's a 4-year term. Yeah, I'll probably run again. And my idea was, I don't like the idea of controlling anybody's life. I never wanted to control anybody's life. The only reason I'm in this position is not to tell anybody what to do. But if I'm not in this position, then there will be somebody else who might be more of a tyrant trying to run my life and tell me what to do. So I'm kind of like a placeholder. I don't have any desire. I don't believe that we need state functions to tell us what to do, but I'm kind of just in this position so there won't be somebody else. Like my little chunk of the world, we can have a sheriff that doesn't want to run anybody's life and tell them what to do. So yeah, I've got like, what would that be? A little over 2.5 years left. And then it's a 4-year term, and I'll probably run again.
Perfect. So thank you, David, for coming on Los Libertinos. I hope you feel I respected your time. And can you please plug in where people can reach you if they wanted to, talk to you a little bit?
Yeah. Let me tell you some things. If people want to read more things that I've written quite a lot for LouRockwell.com and for the Libertarian Institute. I always like to give out my email. I don't mind giving my email to anybody. It's real easy. It's just sheriffdavidhathaway @gmail.com. No weird spelling, no special characters, just sheriffdavidhathaway @gmail.com. And if anyone wants to hear that corrido about me that you're talking about, you just go to YouTube and just search for Hathaway for Sheriff Corrido, and it'll pop right up and you can listen to it.
I'll actually put it right now at the end. So everybody that is watching this, keep listening for a couple more minutes. You're going to hear the corrido, and be sure to come visit us May 7th here at my home. I'm welcoming you in, and it should be a lot of fun. And thank you, David. Peace.
Okay. Thank you, Carlos.
Yeah.
Nos vemos.